Hello, everyone. Welcome to Jamaica 411. Thank you so much for stopping by, keeping me company as usual. If you're here with me for the first time, welcome, welcome. Please remember to subscribe. Give the video a thumbs up if you find the content informative, as well as share and feel free to leave your comments in the comments section. To my subscribers, welcome back. Always nice to have you. And yes, I do appreciate your company. Especially when Mr. O'Keefe him ever tell me say him there to keep me company, you know. Yes, man. And as to the one Mr. Bell, yes, Mr. Elijah, me go call up your name. And Miss Andal, Lords of mercy. Then now you have Joan. As a matter of fact, we have enough Joans. One is Joni. And then, of course, we have my comrade sister, ever with me, Joan. Yes, Joan. Joan Drummond. Yes, man. And all my big friend them in England and America and Canada and Cayman. And my big Bununonops friend them in Jamaica. All of you, welcome. And I don't know if anybody is from anywhere else. I think there might be some Bayesians too, or some Jamaicans living in Barbados. Yes, welcome to all of you. And of course, I appreciate your company. Likewise. Now, you all know the ropes. You're going to give the video a thumbs up from now, please, as well as share. Then you return and join me so we can get down to business. As always, I thank you in advance. And of course, I want to always say I appreciate the comments. And yes, one of these days I will feature those persons who were first to comment on each of my videos. Yes, man. As soon as I upload the video, I go back quick time and wait and see who who comment first. Yes, I let them know. All right. So I kill a little time. I know you're back with me. Let us get down to business. Now, what am I going to be talking about today? Well, there's so much to talk about. And I tell you what, why don't we continue looking at the likely policies of Mark Golding? Yes, I think that would be a good idea because he's seeking to become prime minister, so him say. And therefore, it is very important that we know what it is that he's up to. Being that he's a capitalist in the business of acquiring capital and capital upon top of other capital, businesses upon businesses. That's what capitalism is, So that's what Mark Golding is. So is Peter Bunting, capitalist. And in the modern history of this country, we have not had a capitalist attempting to, well, lead a party, nor for that matter, lead this country. Buster was not a capitalist, he was a usurer. He left that to become a trade unionist and a politician. Norman Manley was a lawyer that he left more or less to become a politician. Michael Manley was a trade unionist and a politician. So was PJ, a lawyer, politician. Portia was not a capitalist. She certainly was a politician. Eddie Seaga, I believe, was a sociologist and a politician. Hugh Shearer, I believe, was a trade unionist and a politician. And as far as I know, Sangster was not a capitalist either. Bruce Golding, although he had a business that he was operating, man must eat. I wouldn't call him a capitalist. He was not using, as far as we know, using his profits to acquire more businesses and so on. No, nor is Andrew Holness for that matter. And certainly Peter Phillips was not a capitalist. So this is unprecedented, and therefore it is very important that we know what this guy is about. Now, the last time I pointed out to you that he was a member of a committee that was set up by Omar Davies called the Tax Policy Review Committee. And that committee was tasked with looking at the tax system in terms of how it affects, productivity as well as investments. And they came up with some proposals, which Omar Davies instructed them that if they are going to be doing any proposal about taxes that should be, increased, it must be revenue neutral, meaning that whatever they are proposing, if they're proposing a reduction in tax somewhere, they need to make it up somewhere else. Revenue neutral simply means the position that the government is in terms of tax revenue must not change. It must not go up and must not come down. And they made several proposals which largely benefits them. The persons that were selected were more or less persons who, whatever their background was, they certainly were not poor. They were well-off people. You have accountants, you have Mark Golding as a lawyer, you have business people representing the private sector organization of Jamaica, at least 3 minority white people of the 12, right? You have 1 trade unionist, and so on. So we're going to continue looking at what it is Mark Golding sat in that committee and proposed in terms of tax reform for Jamaica, who it benefited and who would have suffered as a result of the consequences of what it is they were proposing. So let us now take a look to see what else we can find out about what it is that Mark Golding has in his mind he would rather us not find out about. However, in the meantime, let us remind ourselves of how it was that Mark Golding came to be in the People's National Party. We will hear from his own mouth how he ended up in the PNP, and we will dissect what it is that he was saying to see what, if anything, we may discover that he may have revealed in his utterances. Let's listen now.
I came into the party through Dr. Omar Davis because I knew him in the financial sector, where I had been like one of the leading corporate lawyers in Jamaica and very involved in financial engineering. And so when he was Minister of Finance, a lot of the things that required industry input, I was one of the representatives of the industry that he would deal with. I got to know him through that.
But my peeps, did any of you notice that he never mentioned the tax reform committee that he was on? That he was on, chaired by Joseph Matalon? You recall him speaking of that? I don't recall that either, and I wonder why. Well, let us see if we can discover the reason why. So, what do we know about the Tax Policy Review Committee that Mark Golding sat on, chaired by Joseph Matalon, as commissioned by Omar Davies in order to advise the government on the role that the tax policies played in productivity as well as investments, whether they tend to advance or hinder productivity and investments. That's basically what they were set up to do, as well as simplify the tax system that we have. It's very cumbersome. And in the event that they propose changes to the tax regime, they would ensure that whatever they come with is revenue neutral. Now, it is very much essential that we know what it was that they had proposed. Now, we did this in the previous video, but it's just as a reminder. And then I'm going to add another bombshell. Bombshell of no mean order. I don't think I had included this part in the previous video. But if I did, I don't believe I had emphasized the importance of what was being said. It was a revelation right there before our eyes that they think we are too stupid to see what it was that they were communicating. But we caught it. Yes, it may have been, but some 20 years late, but we caught it nonetheless. And you know what old time people say? Better late than never. So we have found them out. So, what was it that they had proposed? Let us remind ourselves. So, one of the things they asked for was for GCT to be increased by 1% and that all exemptions should be removed and broaden the base. And they anticipate the government would have gotten us X amount of revenues. So they want GCT to increase by 1%, remove all the exemptions on all basic food items, on everything, and that would now broaden the tax base and the tax net to capture everybody. So GCT, they wanted to be placed on everything, all goods, all services. That's the first thing they proposed. The next increase was for GCT to be placed on gas. At the moment, there is no GCT on gas. What you have is special consumption tax of 7% and an ad valorem tax, which moves with the price of fuel, if I recall how it works. Great. So, those are two proposals that they had. Next, they asked for an increase in the income tax threshold. That has been done several times, so all governments agreed with that proposal. And the fourth one, so far, the abolition of the education tax and the hard contribution, which they referred erroneously to tax, right? They said it's a disguise, a tax in disguise. That's what they called the hard trust NTAs, statutory contributions. It's a it's a tax disguised as a statutory contribution. That's how they termed it. So those four are what they propose so far. Then they want to introduce a new tax called the capital gains tax, which is paid, a tax that is paid on assets. Whenever you sell assets and you make a profit, like if you were to sell a house and you make a profit, if you were to sell anything at all, that is assets that you make a profit on that, you pay a certain percentage in tax. We don't have that in Jamaica at this time. Stamp duty, which is paid almost on anything at all, that when you get a receipt when you buy anything from Courts or any other furniture store, anything like that, and you get a receipt if you're registering a business on articles, memorandum of association, you pay stamp duty. You're buying or selling properties, you pay stamp duty. They want that removed, right? Now, when they asked for the removal of stamp duty, they had to find money from elsewhere in order to make up for the loss. So the removal of all these taxes that they wanted did not affect or does not affect the poor man, so to speak. However, the tax that they wanted to introduce, as well as the GCT increase and the broadening of the base, is how they plan to make up the shortfall to the government revenue. You follow? Right. So, what they were in effect doing is transferring the incidence of taxation from themselves. They are earning millions of dollars in salaries and profits, but them no want pay no tax. They said it's unfair, and they now supposed to be creating what they call an equitable system where everybody would contribute. And so they believe that the way to get everybody to contribute is to put the GCT, the consumption taxes, and lower the income tax and the corporate tax, and then now everybody will just go and pay taxes whenever they buy something. That is their idea. Of course, they seem not to understand or don't care to understand that 10% to a man who is earning $30 million, 10% would then be 3 million. That is nothing to him because that don't stop him from live a big life and the life that he wants. But a man who is earning $15,000 a week minimum wage, who is barely making it with food, right, and transportation, he's now going to be asked to take out of that $15,000 $1,500, and that $1,500 mean a lot to him. That could be money that he could be giving his child to go to school. So there is nothing equitable at all about the approach of these men. And Mark Golding was one of them who sat on that committee making the decision with Matalon and others. And it's him that is now looking to go into Jamaica House with those policies. And we know that because even after the government refused to implement it, Matalon and Mark and the whole of them was going all over the damn place promoting it to the other private sector bigwigs, telling them how wonderful the system is, right? And trying to get them on board so that all of them can now group together and pressure the government of Jamaica, whichever one is there, to implement their policy that they say will grow the economy and make life better for people. Yes, we're going to find it for you, my peeps, and show you the evidence that them actually said that even small business would benefit. Imagine that. You are putting the incidence of tax on the consumer who was at that time getting 2,500, I do believe, in minimum wage. And there were people who were below the poverty line in those days, higher than even the unemployment rate. Mark Golding, Matalon, said that these people were not shouldering their fair share, them and those persons who were in the self-employed, people who are not paying their fair share. And it is unfair, they say, for the PAYE, those persons who are there working, they are the ones that are shouldering the tax burden. Of course, not going to say, yes, they pay PAYE and they have to turn around and pay consumption tax as well, right? So what they're saying is it's hard on them. Let's reduce the income tax on them, which of course is reducing income tax on them big shots too, like Matalan and Mark Golding, right? So let's reduce our income tax. Let us reduce the corporate tax on our companies and let the consumers pay when we add GCT to everything. And now everybody now will be on equal footing, except that is a damn lie. Tell Mark Golding and Joseph Matalan that 411 says that is a damn lie. Because, as I said before, $3 million, 10% of 30 million means nothing to people like him. Because him can still eat, him can still go to the supermarket and buy a trolley full of food, right? These are the things that he can do. But to a man who is paying $15,000, that is his salary, his minimum wage, he can ill afford to lose $1, much less $1,500. That $1,500 mean more to him than the $3 million mean to you, Mark Golding. So there was no equity there. What you were proposing was an inequitable society, an inequitable and oppressive tax system. That was what you, Mark Golding, and that was what you, Joseph Matalon, were proposing for Jamaica. What the both of you did was to hijack the process to make it possible for you and your class of people and your business associates and friends pay a minuscule amount of taxes, and the poor people must pay the tax to take care of you. He must pay a disproportionate amount of his income. Yes, 1,500 to a man who is spending 50% of his income on food. $1,500, right? To a man getting $15,000, 50% of which he's paying on food and transportation. That $1,500 mean a lot to him. And therefore, the tax that you are proposing was disproportionate. You are going to make him suffer more, him and his family. But you never care about that. No, not you and Mark Golding. And it's that piece of crap that want to find himself into Jamaica House. And for those persons who can't believe that Marky G them G is part of this conspiracy against the people of this country, the poor people and the middle classes of this country, right? That yes, he was on the committee, but he was not going around promoting it. There you have it. The Jamaica Conference Board, in association with Price Waterhouse Coopers, presents a forum on the tax reform proposals 2005 implications for businesses. And they say where and when, the 21st of March, that would have been 2005, at the conference center. And who was to be in attendance? Read the bottom, a panel comprising of the tax policy reform committee members. And then you have Mrs. Betty Ann Jones Carr. She was an accountant, I suppose, at KPMG, or is an accountant if she's still alive. And Mark Golding of Hart, Muirhead Fatter, Eric Crawford, who is now sitting as a commissioner on the Integrity Commission. They were there. So they were going around promoting this thing, trying to get other people on board, even though the government, which more or less put them together to come up with this idea, rejected it for the most part. They were going around promoting it. This is what they want to see. And the question you may ask is, why were they so promoting it? What it is about this? Yes, we want tax reform, but why do they think that they were so right? Was it even about them being right? Or was it something else? I say to you, my peeps, it was something else. And let me show you what it is. So here's an article entitled Matalon Defense Tax Proposals. Now, I do believe I read part of it for you the last time. I'm going to read this part again because it is essential that you understand what is going on here. And bear in mind that it was this same man, Matalon, who came out and endorsed one of his committee members from way back then. Mark Golding wanted him to lead the PNP, talking all kind of crap about how him full of leadership and him can this and him can. He never lead a thing from him born, yet him I endorse him. Him expected great things from him as a leader, and the man never lead nothing from him born. But him clearly need Mark Golding to lead the PNP and hopefully find himself in government for a reason. And here, way back in 2005, when people start to find out about this thing that they were proposing that government should take up, Omar Davis should take up, right? They started to now level criticisms at him. So now he's coming out to defend it. I want you to listen carefully to what Matalon said. Listen carefully now. So the Gleaner began by saying Joseph M. Matalon, chairman of the Tax Policy Review Committee, has cited the need for greater public discussion on the various proposals of the committee. Mr. Matalon was a guest speaker at the Price Waterhouse Coopers Forum on tax reform held at the Jamaica Conference Center on Monday. To date, the recommendation for tax on capital gains has created a stir. Pundits have made predictions of the subsequent crash of the Jamaica Stock Exchange if implemented. Why? Because the capital gains would be paid on any profit that is made when the stock is sold. So on the stock market where you have buying and selling of shares, any profit that is gained, they would pay the tax on that profit. So there were obviously persons opposed to that, because what that will do is create a disincentive for persons to participate in the stock market, and they were anticipating that it would crash if the government were ever to introduce such a tax. Good. Then now they went on to say, also the incendiary issue of taxation on motor fuels has also fueled public debate. That was what people heard, and that was why they started to pay attention to what it is that this committee was proposing. Remember now that this was 2005 and the events of 1999 was fresh in the minds of people, especially those who suffered because of the riots that took place. And this idiotic group of people were proposing to put GCT on fuel, right? And by the way, 1999 was not the only time people in Jamaica went on bad over the increase in fuel. It happened several times before, but 1999 was the very worst, right? And this group of clowns actually came with a proposal to put GCT on fuel, right? And Omar was in love with the idea. But of course, when people heard what they were coming with, it was a big headline. And of course, they were totally against this proposal for obvious reasons. But not to be daunted, Mr. Matalon and his committee, comprising, of course, Mark Golding, was not satisfied, was not happy with the fact that the people were now against them and they want this thing badly. So, what did Mr. Matalon say on their behalf? But Mr. Matalon argues that the method behind all the tax reform recommendations is to create a more equitable and efficient tax system. You hear that? You want to tax a man who is earning $2,500 per week minimum wage, and you wanted to tax him at a rate of, remember now we know the GCT I believe was 15%, and they wanted to add another percent on it to make it 16% and tax everything. So that man now cannot escape paying the tax, right? He has to pay the tax. The housekeeper, the gardener, all of those people earning minimum wages, the people who work into wholesale stores, they have to pay this tax. And Matalon and his committee, including Mark Golding, believe that this was an equitable arrangement. They would be paying 16%, right? That is what they propose of their income. They're prepared to give that up because they are gaining elsewhere from the lowering of taxes that they were proposing. They call that equitable, and they call it an efficient tax system. Perhaps it is, but equitable? No. Anyway, he went on to say, listen to this part now, my peeps, because this is the part that is critical. This is him speaking now to the private sector people. He's telling them something, right? Who are opposing this package of taxes that they're coming with. This is what he said. I would encourage my colleagues in the private sector not to isolate proposals from the package, not to take anything out of what we are proposing. That's what he's saying. As a whole, but rather do the math. Don't oppose what it is that we are doing. What I'm urging you to do is to just do the maths. Do the maths in terms of the reform package's overall impact on their net tax liabilities. What is Matalon telling them? Matalon is telling them that he and Mark Golding and the others sat down, right? Lloyd Goodley, who is supposed to be a trade unionist, Alison Peart, Ethelene Norton Coke, who has now been deceased, and others. They sat down and came up with a tax package that if they were to do the maths, they would realize that it is going to impact their net tax liabilities, meaning to say they're going to be paying less taxes. And therefore, he's urging them not to oppose what it is that they are coming with, but accept it, right? It is to benefit you. Now, if it is a benefit to the private sector colleagues of Joe Matalon and Mark Golding, who are they? Business people. That's who they're talking to. They're talking to the business people and saying to them that this tax package is beneficial to you. But since it is supposed to have been revenue neutral, meaning that whatever it is that they are benefiting from lower taxation for his colleagues in business, it meant that that money has to come from somewhere else. And where was it coming from? The consumers, the poor man, the middle class people, those persons below the poverty line which would have been hovering around 20 odd percent at that time, right? The pensioners who would have been getting little money, those persons who were unemployed, right? And sitting at home. They were the ones who were supposed to know foot the bill of these business people who are making profits. And we were supposed to be the ones to fork up more money to pay the police, to pay the nurses, right? To pay the soldiers, to pay the civil servants so that them can have more money in their pockets. And Matalon was passing this off, and Mark Golding was attempting to pass this off because they were going all over the place promoting it. So they were hoping to pass this off as equitable when what it was a hijacking of the process. Now, this now just about kills it for Matalon, especially Matalon, because he was the one that was making the comment, right? On behalf of the committee. However, on the flip side, there are a great number of Jamaican households that do not make up the work or investing classes, and tax reform for wages would not help them, and tax increases on consumption would hurt them. You heard that. The proposal that Matalon and Mark Golding came with the other members of that committee is to benefit workers and those persons who own capital, the business people. Those are the persons who would benefit. The tax that they were going to take off of themselves and the workers because they wanted to increase the threshold, which meant the government would lose revenue, right? That's a benefit that the workers were getting. In terms of the business people, they were getting lots more. They were getting stamp duty removed. They were getting, reduction on transfer tax and all kind of something, which I didn't mention before. But those were what they were benefiting from. That's why Matalon tell them do the maths, and you will see that your tax liabilities, what it is that you're going to pay in taxes, has reduced. That is what he was trying to tell them. And so the gleaner is pointing out that on the flip side, those persons who now are not in the workforce, those people who are working but under the poverty line because they're not them working like maybe a day or maybe a few hours doing odd jobs here and there, a little hustling, a little juggling, and so on to try and see if they can survive. They are the ones who will be paying the GCT on the goods and services that they consume. Every food that they buy, every item of food that they buy to put in their mouth will be increased on them. And what the gleaner is saying, right? That they are the ones who will hurt from the increase in consumption tax. So, what did Matalon say about that? Well, recognizing this, Mr. Matalon states, and I'm quoting him, tax burden analyses show that the tax reform package would add an additional $700 per year, right? Per annum, per individual among such households. So they already know that there are people in the society, the pensioners, those not working, those below the poverty line, that will be paying more taxes. They calculate it will cost them $700 more per annum, per household, right? And they are saying increased taxes would be viewed as an unjust imposition that adds still further to the heavy burdens they face in their everyday struggle to survive. So he recognized that. Here's what he said. Despite this fact, Mr. Matalon stated, the gains in economic efficiency of the proposed reforms were so potentially significant as to demand that we find some means other than the tax system itself to ameliorate the small increased burden on the lowest income individuals. And I, for one, refuse to believe that it is somehow beyond our collective capabilities to succeed in the effort. Well, Mr. Matalon, when you can figure out how outside of the government helping those persons who you want to disadvantage and make poorer with your tax policy, then you come and tell us. Yes, listen to what this man said, my peeps. This man that is supposed to have sense. Listen to what he said. Having recognized that there is an increased cost to each household of these poverty-stricken people, he said increased taxes would be viewed as an unjust imposition on those people, right? And despite of that, he said that the gains to economic efficiency is so important. The fact that me and my friends, them in the private sector, go and pay less taxes, that is so important to the efficiency we're trying to achieve, right? That it is not beyond us to find a way, listen to this now, to find some means other than the tax system itself to help these people out of them situation. That's what he's saying there. Basically, what he's saying is that government must leave them alone, because how else is government going to help the people except through the tax system? How are you going to be able to create something like a path program to help people who are in need? How are you going to be able to create a welfare system for somebody who is in need without taxes, without paying for it through taxes? What he's saying in essence is that yes, those persons below the poverty line who are going to be expected to pay $700 per year, right? Them should not be helped by government. That's what he mean when him said that it must be done by some other means except the tax system. So him said government must help them. That's what he's saying. Let them stay there. I mean, the man is telling the government of Jamaica that they must make the people suffer. Don't help them. We might go talk about there must be some other way to do it. Which other way to do it for help tens of thousands of people? And you don't want to pay for. You see how them people are evil and wicked? And he was speaking on behalf of that committee with good up PMP people on it. My peeps. And not one of them came out and said, no, 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 you're not speaking on my behalf. Therefore, Mark Golding cannot escape. It came out of Matalon's mouth. Right? But since they did not propose, remember now, they were supposed to come up with something revenue neutral. Now they're coming up with something that is prejudicing the poor people. That's exactly what Omar said. When him looked on it, he said, but these people mean to say this policy that they're proposing would affect the people at the lower rung of the ladder. And therefore him could not implement. So then got to Audley to implement it. And poor Audley go implement it. I don't know what them they promise. The Labour Party promised them in 2007, but then went and implemented it. This equitable system that them claim was going to bring economic growth. Yes, man. And what happened? What happened? We had an economic crisis going on. But none of our trading partners, except for Britain, they had 2 consecutive years of economic decline. All of the others, Canada, US, Trinidad had only 1 year. We had 3 consecutive years. And only in the 4th year of Bruce Golding's administration did he see a little growth, 1.7%. At the end of the implementation of Matalon and Mark Golding and the whole of them solution that was when make the economic grow and better for us, those policies that benefited Mr. Matalon and Mark Golding's colleagues in the private sector, yes, at the end of 4 years, the country's economy declined by 5.1%. We had 13 quarters of negative growth, 13 consecutive quarters of negative growth. And why, my peeps? Because they went and put the tax burden on the consumers, majority of whom, 83% of them, were poor people and those below the poverty line. And as a result of that, poor man on fixed income had to cut back. And what was the consequence? When this direct taxation now started on the people's income, businesses started to fold left, right, and center. Yes, my peeps, whole heap of business lockdown. Whole heap. Why? Because of the narrow interest of some stupid, greedy businessmen who could not see even their own self-interest. Anyway, my peeps, that's it for me today. Thank you so much for joining me, for sharing, liking, subscribing, and leaving your comments in the comment section. Until next time, take good care of yourselves and walk good.